Hey everybody, James Arnold Taylor here, and you are listening to the great, big, beautiful podcast. Obi-Wan Kenobi has a good feeling about this. Yabba dabba doo, Fred Flintstone too. And Ratchet, well, he's just me.
Have you ever been to Disneyland?
Affirmative.
That was definitely an e-ticket.
I can't believe all the new gadgets they've got now. For a while, we didn't even have a house phone, not to mention laser discs, high-def TV.
You are listening to the Great Big Beautiful Podcast. This week on the show.
So I have to ask if the States were a comedian, who would it be?
Some Americans find it insulting. Before I say it, remember, I'm sort of half joking, and the part that's half serious.
I love that you have to set this up.
I'm setting it up, and it's like 3 words. Yeah, I'll keep setting it up. I'm half serious, but it's an just like Woody Allen is an exaggeration with a Canadian.
Yeah.
This is an exaggeration. Here I go. Don't hate me because you're American. Andrew Dice Clay.
Here are your hosts, Jamie Greene and Justin Connors.
Welcome to the Great Big Beautiful Podcast. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/the GBB Podcast, and Twitter @the GBB Podcast as well. And you can find us all over the internet in different places to download.
All over the internet.
Well, you know what?
Really?
If you search our podcast, there's like these crazy micro podcast sites where they list your RSS feed. And I went down the rabbit trail one day, and there's so many of them. And
Are we getting paid for those?
Well, I mean, it's our RSS feed, right? We have made a cent on YouTube, though.
Yeah, just let's be honest. We're not making any money on this. We've not monetized this in any way.
No.
We're just doing this. We're doing it because we like it.
And the reality is, if we approach sponsors, we probably could. But I know that we're talking podcast business in front of everyone. But I think that for it to be it would have to be relevant to our audience. I don't think I would do it unless it was relevant to our audience. And if
I agree.
It'd have to be worth it. I wouldn't just, a couple $100 a month go sell our souls to advertisers.
Yeah, like you're saying. I mean, we're not gonna start getting sponsors like Dropbox or something like that. We're not a tech website, but if something comes along, then we're not opposed to it. But we do this because we enjoy it. We're just doing this for the fun of it.
Well, yeah, I'm in so many podcast groups where their main focus is just like get the numbers so we can charge ads, right? And
I mean, we see numbers. Right. It's nice that people are listening. It's nice that people are interacting. Every week we get more and more people interacting with us on Facebook and Twitter, and that's great. That's kind of
right.
I mean, if we're doing it, it's to connect with people and to share our guest stories.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we just like talking to people and sharing their stories. We're not doing this to, like we need to see those download numbers. we need to get sponsors. We need to,
I'm in it for the tweets from LeVar Burton. That's what I'm in for.
Exactly. I mean, like if we had 1,000,001 listeners and downloads every week, maybe we could finally land that Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen combo duo. But until then, it's nice to have dreams.
If we were doing 1 million, we'd be making bank anyway. So. Talk about a full-time job. All right.
But it's not, it's not holding us back in any way. We've been having great guests, and today just continues that trend.
Exactly. And today we're interviewing this may as well be a Canadian episode, because I know America claims Kevin McDonald. I know they like him, but in Canada, this is like, for some reason we like to claim things. Like, the Tragically Hip just played their last show, and if Americans don't know who the Tragically Hip is, it's a weird phenomenon where they're a band that they got a little bit big in America, but nothing like Canada. And this is and Kevin McDonald, cross borders, but we claim things as ours and like hold on to them, right?
Yeah. Like you did you claim Justin Bieber?
No, here's the funny joke. People are like, we're going to send Justin Bieber back to Canada. And we always say, well, he was fine before we let him go to the U.S. Like, he came to Hollywood, and that was it.
But yeah, you're calling it a Canada episode, but where were you?
I wasn't there.
Again.
I forget where I was. I was at the dentist, maybe? I think I was at the dentist.
a likely story. We talked smack about you when you weren't there. It's okay.
Yes, I heard. Hey, he asked about me, so all Canadians know each other.
You all know each other.
When you answered the phone, when I was listening back to it, guys, and it's not in the edit, but when he answered the phone, Jamie was like, my co-host can't make it. He goes, "Oh, Justin Connors."
You all know each other?
We all, yeah. Like, he lives in Winnipeg, but whatever. We know each other.
See, most Americans have no idea about Canadian geography, though. So Winnipeg and, Eastern Canada, it's like, you guys are neighbors.
Yeah, exactly. Even I think that's like Maine versus
like Oregon.
Right. So Jamie, you talked to Kevin McDonald, which I mean, it's a fantastic interview. He's hilarious. You're funny too, but he's funny.
Come on. You put me on the phone with somebody from Kids in the Hall. I'm not even worth a chuckle,
And like you said, it's very meta because he's starting a new podcast. So we're talking about a podcast on a podcast.
Yeah, he has a new show, and it's cleverly named Kevin McDonald's Kevin McDonald Show. And as of right now, I don't know if you guys are listening to this when it releases or later, but as of right now, there is just the first episode. He released the first episode a couple weeks ago, and he does it. It's like half scripted, half not. The format may change up a little bit, but the way that the first episode works is that he's got like a scripted comedy sketch with Wallace Shawn. So they like kind of act that out, and then they do an interview. In the interview, obviously he prepared questions, but that's unscripted. And then Kevin tells a hilarious story about Kids in the Hall, and then they have on Brad Roberts from Crash Test Dummies. It's a very Canadian episode, and Brad sings a couple songs which are just amazing. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I remember the Crash Test Dummies, and the two songs he sings are their two biggest songs. It's the Superman song and the song.
Yep.
And I remember those being on the radio all the time, and I haven't heard them in years. But he sings it completely stripped down. It's just him and a guitar, and that's it. And it's beautiful. It's haunting, really. I mean, it's if you haven't listened to this episode of Kevin's show, I can't recommend it highly enough just for those songs.
Right.
But he performs the show. It's sort of like they call it like a variety show. So it's like an old fashioned variety show. They perform it in front of a live audience. So the way that it's going to work is he's going to write a whole bunch of episodes at once and then go, set up a few dates like in New York or LA, and then perform it in front of a live audience. And then he'll have a few episodes in the can and he'll just release them that way.
That's awesome.
So that's the way that he's doing it. And right now it's just the first episode. It's hilarious. If you're a fan of Kevin, if you're a fan of Kids in the Hall, you can't go wrong. But beyond that, we talk about the podcast a little bit, but then, we talk, it's funny because without you there, we did talk a little bit about Canada versus the United States. And I wish you could have been there to chime in on those conversations.
Yeah.
But we talk about sketch comedy, we talk about live audiences, we talk about Kids in the Hall, we talk about his voice work, because he's in both Lilo and Stitch, and he was in Invader Zim. It's just he tells a lot of great stories. It's a great conversation, and he's just freaking hilarious.
Yes, he is. And yeah, like it's really funny to see someone that comes out of Canada and makes it in the U.S. because fundamentally they're still Canadian, but they bring that with them. It's like it's part of them. I don't know if it seems like that to Americans if they know that, but to us,
it's funny in
the back of our mind.
It's funny, like when Kids in the Hall first sort of made a splash, and it was back in the 90s, and I remember it was on Comedy Central, and it was big. And that was sort of like these were these Canadian weirdos, and it's like you watch it, and the comedy, especially for the time, it was so off the wall and so abstract, and so it was like Monty Python. It was like if you thought it was funny, you thought it was the funniest thing you've ever seen. But if you didn't get it, you just sat there like, I don't really understand what I'm watching.
These guys? Yeah.
Like, why is this funny? Because I don't get it. But I, in preparing for this episode, like preparing my questions and stuff, I always do a whole bunch of research. And I fell down a Kids in the Hall YouTube rabbit hole, man. And it was just like an hour and a half, 2 hours later, I'm still sitting there watching sketches because it was just, and I haven't laughed that hard in so long. That show and that comedy, it really holds up. It's still just so funny.
Perfect.
So funny.
Well, let's hope for a Kids in the Hall reunion sometime.
They do it from time to time. They just did one a couple years ago.
Well, and I was reading, and they were talking about possibly CBC wants them to do. That's the Canadian broadcaster wants them to do a Christmas special. So we'll see if that ever happens. Nice. So we're gonna play that interview for you right now. Hope you enjoy.
So I guess this is sort of a little bit meta. We're going to be talking about a podcast on a podcast, but I should first say congratulations on the Kevin McDonald show.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. That's very nice. Thank you.
What led to you wanting to do a podcast, I guess, first of all?
It grew out of nothingness. I never thought about it. I thought I'd rather keep pitching TV shows. I would have thought in writing movie scripts that I'll try to sell. I thought I'm too old for podcasts. I didn't think that, but I'm sure some part of my brain thought that.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine, Phil, who's now a producer in this podcast because he did this, he sent me. I'm a sort of a music nerd. And he sent me Mark Maron podcast, the one where he interviews Todd Rundgren, because he knew I was a Todd Rundgren fan. Mm-hmm. And then I enjoyed it, and then we started talking about how I should do a small podcast where I interview just musicians, because I'm a music nerd. I'll keep that. Maybe that would have been the name of it. I'm a music nerd. I don't know. And then we got these guys, Alex and Joe, these brilliant young producers of a company called Forever Dog. And they got excited about it. And then they said, because you're Kevin McDonald, which means what they really mean, because you're a minor celebrity, we could get a theater out and have a tape in front of a live audience. And I thought, well, if we're going to do that, then why have a live audience watch me do something I've never done before? And it's probably a weakness of mine, interviewing people.
Right.
Why don't we make it like the kind of TV show that I've been filming and pitching for the past few years, sort of a variety show? And I figure I'm close to the end of my life than the beginning, so why don't we go all out and put everything in the podcast?
Yeah.
Put everything in it. So you see, it kept growing. This took like about a month. I'm sure it's a long story, but it's a short story compared to the 2 months it took to figure out what it was. So the podcast is everything. It's me doing monologues, sketches, comedy songs. Because it's a podcast, I will throw some interviews in there. We'll always have a comedy guest, and because we have a comedy guest, they'll always be in the sketches or one of the sketches, right. And then I'll have a music guest, and they'll always do a song. And a lot of these celebrities will be people I know from the 90s, but there's a few younger people that will do it every now and then. And also, I'm sorry I'm talking so long, but I'll be quiet too. And I swear to God, these things that I always pitch on TV, I'm throwing this element in as we do more podcasts. It's going to become more of a sort of like an old radio show, like Jack Benny, where he sort of did a show within a show. It was like Jack Benny, and he was the host of a variety show, but part of the show was Jack Benny pretending to have trouble with the writers writing that sketch. So I may do something where I'm having trouble writing that sketch and having an argument with the producer, and then we do the sketch.
Oh, that's amazing.
So show within a show. So I am literally throwing everything in this podcast, but I think it all makes sense together.
Yeah, I mean, why not, really? It's your show, you do what you want, right?
Yeah. Soon I'll be dead. My lethal say the funeral. He put everything in that podcast.
he sure put his heart into that one.
Yeah, the podcast. Anyway, not his 3 marriages. The podcast.
Well, I mean, the show is. I mean, you've got one episode out so far, and like you said, it is this throwback to this variety or sketch show, and
yes.
And you kind of alluded to where it's going, but you're throwing everything at it, but what else did you have in mind in sort of in terms of like your format and your guests? I mean, do you want to spoil any of that, or do you just want to?
No, I would spoil it for sure. But it's going to it's going to evolve. We're organizing the next set of podcasts, and what I'm going to do is because right now I'm the only writer on it, is like write 2 or 3 podcasts, and then every 2 or 3 months go to either New York or Los Angeles and get the guests and do 3 shows over a course of 2 weeks. As I write it, it's going to progress. Right now I have this vague throw everything into it idea, Jack Benny show within a show, but I'm sure by the time I finish writing the next 3, It's going to evolve in my head what it's like. And also, it's also organic because I'm really interviewing guests. And the podcast I did right now, the best part of it are the guests.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying that, but the best part is the Wallace Shawn interview. I just happened to be lucky that I picked some guy who was brilliant. And,
yeah, I'm sure that was
and
all
his stories
luck,
are
right?
amazing. And the other amazing thing was the Brad Roberts doing an acoustic version of Superman.
Amazing.
Which, it was so amazing, and I always loved that song. But I love many songs. But when when it was doing it live, when you hear it, oh my God, that's a special song. I forgot that that's a special song.
Yeah, it was funny. I was listening to the episode, and it was it was great the whole way through the sketch and then the Wallace Shawn interview. Everything was your Kids in the Hall story. Everything was great. But once he started singing, it was like whatever I was doing, I just stopped and I just I just stared straight ahead and I just let the song enter, and it was like. All right, I was already going to recommend this show for people to listen to, but like this right here at the end of the show when he sings those two songs, it's like unbelievable.
Well, see, that's amazing, and I'm glad you said that. I'm glad that came across in the podcast because it's definitely happening live, and it came across. I'm glad you're saying that came across in the podcast because the show has to be bigger than me. If the show's just as good as Kevin McDonald is, that's fine. But there's got to be something a little bigger than just me, and that's the show. Yeah. So the fact that the guests are the best part of the show, and I'm likable enough that nobody wants me out, I think that's what's going to make it more popular than anything. Picking the right guests. And I mean, right now we're doing the Chicago Podcast Festival, and I have no right to say this because we haven't even asked them yet. But my dream is to ask Jeff Tweedy of Wilco because I think he lives near Chicago.
Oh my God, that would be great.
Yeah, I think it's all about the guests, and whether he says no, I'll never do anything for that guy, or no, that's the kind of thing I'm trying to do. I'll write great sketches or as great as I can, but as I say, the show has to be bigger than me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I obviously hear that. I co-host a podcast, and it's nobody tunes in every week to listen to me and Justin. They listen to the guests, and that's
right.
It's telling everybody else's story. Really, is what it's about.
Right.
Is this the first time that you've been the interviewer?
Yes, yes. I've never done it before. That's the one thing I was scared about. I was very lucky in the first one that I had Wallace Shawn just go on and tell great stories, and I was so lucky. And he was shocked every time he got a laugh. He didn't know that he was telling funny stories. He doesn't he doesn't think he's funny. But yeah, it's the first time, and it's a skill that I'll develop more. Right now, it's a plan. Whenever I interview is to get out of the way and try to set up a story. But I'm not going to do like a talk show thing. Well, like you do a podcast. You don't do that, right? I'm not going to talk to them beforehand and come up with like stories they want. So I think that's the great thing about podcast interviews is they're like real chats.
Yeah.
And if a funny story pops up, that's gold. But just to hearing two people, it's pretty interesting, I think.
Absolutely. So my co-host Justin, who couldn't be here, he is Canadian, and he's just gutted that he couldn't be here to talk to you because he's a huge fan. Yeah, I know. Oh, well, Justin, and I know he'd want me to ask this, but how much are you going to keep that quote unquote Canadian flavor as you go on with the show? I mean, we mentioned that Brad Roberts was there from Crash Test Dummies, but how much are you going to keep that as part of the show?
Oh, I think there'll be a lot of Canadian flavor. I think there'll be a lot of times where I think I'll get a band that maybe people don't know in the States, but I know they're so great that they should be heard. The greatest band in Canada, they sort of just split up, sadly.
Yeah.
Their lead singer is sort of sick with a terminal illness.
Yeah.
But I was planning to get them to Tragically Hip. Mm-hmm. They're the most popular band ever in Canada.
Yeah. I watched that concert that they streamed live. It was amazing.
Oh, so you know them. You know them.
Yeah, of course.
But a lot of Americans don't.
You're right.
For the sadder reasons, and who cares on my podcast, that won't happen now.
Yeah.
But definitely there's and sometimes maybe I'll have I think I'll always try to get celebrity guests, so maybe I'll get a second guest who's just a great comic, and a lot of them will be like Canadians, I think.
Yeah.
There'll definitely be a Canadian flavor. It won't be what I'm going for, but it's what I know more, so it'll just happen, I think, organically.
Yeah, well, that's great. You wrote an article, I was in the research I was doing, you wrote an article for a Huffington Post a few years ago now, where it was all about why you love Canada. And in there, you said that if Canada were a comedian, it would be Woody Allen because you think
Yes.
of Canada as a short, balding man with thick glasses who stutters when talking to a girl.
Yeah.
And from my outsider perspective, and through Justin, who's my lens into Canada, he says that's remarkably accurate. So I have to ask if the States were a comedian, who would it be?
Oh, I didn't put that because I always when I at parties I've had this theory for years. Some Americans find it insulting. Before I say it, remember, I'm sort of half joking, and the part that's half serious.
I love that you have to set this up.
I'm setting it up, and it's like 3 words. Yeah, I'll keep setting it up. I'm half serious, but it's an just like Woody Allen is an exaggeration with a Canadian.
Yeah.
This is an exaggeration. Here I go. Don't hate me because you're American. Andrew Dice Clay.
I can see it.
Yeah.
I can see it. I was thinking you were gonna go like I almost said Harrison Ford, Howard Stern.
Well, same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. I could easily switch that to Howard Stern. Same thing.
Yeah, Howard Stern is less of a comedian though. He's just more like a personality.
That's the argument I've had for years with people that he's not a comedian.
Yeah.
He gets people to enjoy watching him by shocking people.
Exactly. Right. When you do stand up, do you? I don't know if you still get this, but do you still notice a difference in crowds or a response that you get for when you're in the States or versus Canada?
I notice differences in crowds, whether I'm doing it by myself or the kids in the hall. Every city has a different personality. Every city, a crowd is a completely different fat guy who has like a different personality. And you sort of notice it, especially when you're doing stand-up and you're doing like 6 or 7 shows a weekend. Mm-hmm. It's just different. They all laugh at one joke, the same volume, and and that'll be Washington D.C. And then when you go to Denver, they'll laugh at either a lower volume or same volume. It's pretty amazing. I don't see a difference between Canadian and the States. It's just every city's different.
What's the best city for stand-up?
For stand-up? Well, it depends what club you go to. Because my stand-up, you sort of have to know who I am. Mm-hmm. It's sort of... So when I play improv theaters and alternative clubs, I do well because they've come to see Kevin McDonald. They know it's like they know it's not going to be like jokes because I don't write jokes, but it's going to be comedy.
Right.
But the joke, it starts off with saying, I'm Kevin McDonald, I'm a sketch comic, and I'm going to try stand-up for the first time. So if I'm doing it at a stand-up club, half the people there don't know who I am because they come for the club.
Yeah. And
they're probably like under 40. And so in an alternative club where they're laughing, where I'm pretending to, as my act proceeds, I pretend to have trouble. If you're in a stand-up club, you just see a 50-year-old guy having trouble, and
it's just a little bit sad.
Yeah, to them it's a little bit sad. That's the way my act is. Like I say, I do quite well when people come for me, and it's alternative. But stand-up clubs, it's 50-50. I could do well, or one person once yelled halfway through my act, "For God's sake, tell us jokes!"
Oh no! Do you still get heckled?
Well, if they don't know me, sure.
Yeah?
It doesn't happen. That was rare. Like, that was the first time in 35 years.
Wow.
The very first time was one of the very first shows I did with the original Kids in the Hall. Dave Foley and I and Luciano Casimiri. We did a show, and my hair was like crazy high and curly. Uh-huh. And somebody said, "Get off the stage, fuzzhead." And I got sad. I had just finished living with my drunk dad, and I had no self-esteem. And I remember Dave said, "Get out of here! There's a club that sells cheaper beer." So we were kicked out of that theater
oh my God.
because of that. But it had I really hadn't been heckled that I remember until like the thing I just told you about, which was last year in Calgary, like in a Canadian place.
Oh no!
And the first show went well, and the second show it was all young people, and I saw them yawning and stuff, and I was trying something new, and it was long, and some woman very politely, 'cause she was a Canadian, but still she said, "For God's sake," so not that politely. "For God's sake, tell us jokes."
And it's like, when that's not your thing, like how do you come back from that, right?
Mm-hmm. I somehow got laughs. I went, "Hey, jokes," and I try to. The joke was that I was trying to make up a joke at the moment, and it made no sense. And then I sort of got the audience back. and then I went. I skipped 20 minutes of my act to the end, and which is the closest thing I have to surefire. And at that point, they wanted to like me, and I did okay at the end. But it was very humiliating when I went in the green room, and my old friend Harry Dupe was there, who lives in Calgary now and came to visit me, who's known me since the early 80s.
Yeah.
And it was kind of humiliating, but that's the way. But that's the pact you sign with the devil when you go on stage.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter that you have a TV show. That like anything can happen to anyone.
That's the magic and the danger of a live audience, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk sketch comedy for a minute. I mean, I remember back back in the 90s when Kids in the Hall was on, Saturday Night Live, Almost Live, these shows that were like, redefining sketch comedy, and they had primetime audiences and they were ridiculously popular.
Right.
It's sort of, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, Saturday Night Live is a different beast. I don't see that going anywhere, but it seems like most sketch comedy is not on TV anymore. It's online, or if it's
right.
some other venue. I mean, do you think that there's a future for sketch comedy on TV, or is it just moving to a different place?
I think there is I think they're going to feed off each other. I think there is a future for sketch comedy for TV. I think more and more. It's happened a bit with the Birthday Boys, and even though it's not sketch comedy, Broad City, I would sort of put in that category. Mm-hmm. I think more and more people are going to get TV shows from web series and from sketches. I think so. And sketch comedy is pretty strong. At least it was a couple of years ago. Key and Peele at its peak, and Inside Amy Schumer. And so and sketch comedy's always gone through waves. So maybe the wave is going to go down a bit, but when it goes up, I think that'll be the peak of people getting TV shows from the web series thing, I think.
And I mean, likewise, right along with that, live audiences have almost completely disappeared from TV. I mean, there's the rare sitcom that's still.
I know, it's true. I mean, that's how I would do a sitcom, but it's still kind of sad. And sketch shows, it's kind of sad.
Yeah. So, I mean, since that is such a huge part of your background and where you came from, how important was it to get that live audience for the podcast? Like, was that ever in doubt, or, did you say this
well, no, that's what gave me the idea. I mean, I was going to do like a quiet little, like Mark Maron copycat interview with just musicians. And as soon as I heard the word live audience, well, we got to make a show of it.
Yeah.
It's a show. I'm not going to quietly ask Todd Rundgren about a deep cut inside 2 of A Wizard of True Star, his 4th album, in front of a live audience. I'm going to write sketches and jokes, and we're going to have like a comedy and music and a big show. So there was never any doubt when I heard live audience. The Kids in the Hall, when we first got our TV show, we'd been a stage troupe for a few years. That's how we were discovered. But we always thought that we wanted to film our sketches, and Lorne Michaels calmed us down and said, well, maybe do 20-30% film sketches, which is what we did. Yeah. He said, you're a live act, and it would be weird all of a sudden just to take that away. Also, we were young, and we were kind of punk rocky, and I think a bit of our thing, especially back then, not anymore, was about excitement.
Yeah.
And so to drain the excitement from it and just film it would probably not have been the best way to start off representing the Kids in the Hall to a wide audience watching us on TV.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you watch shows like that, or when you watch like Kids in the Hall or Saturday Night Live when it's prime, it's the audience reactions to the jokes and to the, to watching those jokes land, or to watching the unexpected happen in front of these people, and their genuine reactions, not canned applause.
Exactly. There's 2 kinds of excitement watching a sketch show. The excitement of a good idea. Mm-hmm. And then with the Kids in the Hall was the excitement of a good idea every now and then, and the excitement of the audience reaction. Now, Chappelle's show, which I love, there was the excitement of a good idea, like the time that he played a blind racist KKK guy who didn't know that he was African American.
Yes.
That's an exciting idea. And he couldn't get in front of a live audience, and that's totally valid too. And if I did a sketch show, I'd do it in front of a live, who knows? But that's exciting too, the excitement of a great idea.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, on Kids in the Hall, you guys really did push the envelope in many ways, and you managed to get away with a lot.
Yes.
And I know that there were censorship battles, from time to time with a lot of the issues and sketches that you guys put together. But were there any sketches or ideas that, among the 5 of you that you just said, this might be pushing it. This might be crossing the line?
Yes, there is. First of all, we mostly got away with a lot because we were in a tiny little bubble in Toronto. HBO sent one person out to us once a year. They didn't care. We could do anything. Though they did. They didn't show Dr. Seuss Bible, where we killed Jesus Christ to Dr. Seuss first.
I don't know why not.
I don't know why not. Most of they showed everything. We were very lucky. And CBC, the president of CBC, was actually the guy who discovered us because he was working for Lorne Michaels. Then he got promoted to the president of CBC. So he just wanted to please Lorne Michaels. So he invented Canadian TV for a while because of us, had 2 prime times. So from 7 to 9, you would watch the family shows. 9 to 10 is our big news hour, our news show called The National. And then 10 to 12, and CBC is our big, station here, the BBC.
Yep.
And then 10 to 12, he showed us and Larry Sanders, and unedited, and nobody ever complained.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I don't know. Am I allowed to? Yeah, you don't know what it is yet, so you can't answer this. Am I allowed to tell you the idea that the other kids in the hall did what Dave and I do?
That was the question.
All right, it's shocking. And actually, they were ambivalent. It was more the producers who were saying over our dead bodies, "Are you going to do this?" And I'm glad they did.
Yeah. Wait.
Because
So wait.
usually the kids,
This was your idea?
It was, yeah, Dave and I. It was actually Dave's idea, but I liked it.
Okay.
And because usually we think of an idea that we weren't ever thinking we were shock comedy. We thought we were comedy.
Right.
Sometimes it was Python. Sometimes it was Carol Burnett. And then later people told us it was shocking. And we go, really? We just thought it was funny. So the idea is it was based on a runner. What was it called? I forget it. Everyone knows it. I forget it. Like bad moments in career show where people make bad decisions in show business. The most famous one is when this made the show where Dave gets the Oscar and he thanks career-ending moments. That's a career-ending moments.
Okay.
Where Dave wins the Oscar and he accidentally thanks Hitler.
Right.
So we did a few of those, and then we thought of another one where it'd be set in 1965. We'd be on the Ed Sullivan Show, and Dave and I were like folk singing duo, like Simon and Garfunkel sort of. And our song was here it is. Our song was "Sex with Children. I think it's okay. Sex with children. We do it every day. Sex with children. Think it's all right. Sex with children. We do it every night." And we weren't allowed to do that.
I don't know why not.
I'm glad now, of course.
Yeah, probably. That would be one of the ones you look back on and think,
Why did we think that was funny, Dave?
why was that funny?
Why is that funny? Because it ended our career? Yeah. Sort of, I get it.
I love that that's what stuck with you, though, after all these years, that you're still, that's the one that got away.
That's the one that got away. No, I'm happy. I'm happy he got away. But that's the best example of something that we inside decided not to do.
Oh, that's a good example.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the show, like you were saying, people thought that it was, pushing the envelope and it was, shocking, and you just thought it was funny.
We just thought it was funny.
Yeah, but, I mean, you look back on it, and now I think maybe, I don't know, do you look back at it now and say, oh, okay, I can see why people thought that was shocking? Or no, you just still think it was funny?
I still think it's funny.
Well, it's both. I think it's definitely both.
For two reasons. A, I think it's funny, and B, this was before South Park and Tom Greene.
Okay.
So now I've seen shocking,
yeah.
I like done to death. I just think it's, I just think it's funny. I get intellectually, I get the killing Jesus Christ, the Dr. Seuss rhyming is shocking.
To an extent.
But I'm not, when I watch it, I'm not intellectualizing and I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
And it just feels like, again, the excitement of a good idea. It just feels like a really funny idea.
Yeah.
And we respect Jesus for it. He plays it totally straight. It's Dr. Seuss we're making fun of.
Of course. But the show was conceptual. It was abstract, and I guess I don't know if I would call it shocking, but I would call it, I guess, unrefined. I mean, compared to some of some of the other things that were on.
That's good. I never thought of that word before, but that's very good.
So I mean, with that being said, there weren't a whole lot of other shows or other groups to look to for inspiration. You guys were very much doing your own thing. So, right. I mean, were you aware of that at the time? They're like, we're charting our own course, and we don't have...
Yeah, we always thought that. Even when we were a stage troupe, we were in Toronto, and there was the big stage troupe was Second City. And in a way, I mean, we would have started a sketch troupe without Second City, but in a way, it was sort of an unspoken thing, but it was a reaction against Second City, where they would do parody songs. Like, that killed us. Whether they have a piano player like on their stage, and like that killed us. Or before the show, they do a warm up where they do funny voices and go in a circle. Even now, when I go teaching workshops, and they ask me to improvise with them, I can't do warm-ups with them. And nobody understands, but I always think a true Kids in the Hall fan will understand why I can't do an improv warm-up with them. But no one ever does.
No one ever does, huh?
I don't know. Do you understand?
Why you can't do a warm-up?
Yeah, where we're in a circle and we're going, woo, 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 and then the next person takes the woo, 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 makes it a different noise, woo, 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 woo.
Oh,
and
right.
The next person... It just seems square for us. We came from a place in Toronto in the 80s, Queen Street West, which was sort of a pretentious artistic place, and I guess that rubbed off on us a bit. And what was your original question? Because I had another point.
There wasn't a question, actually.
I remember here's something else that your question made me think of.
Yeah.
The unrefined part I really liked.
Oh, yeah.
We were rough, like we never, there was a group also in Toronto called the Maroons, and they wore nice pants and maroon sweaters, and we hated that. And we were just we were sort of like, not nearly as self-destructive, but sort of like the Replacements.
Okay.
Like we were doing a show, and if one of our girlfriends was there and we were splitting up with them, the scene would become us having an argument with our girlfriend who was in the audience. It was sort of cool, almost pretentiously cool.
Yeah.
And we sort of took that spirit as much as you could on TV. And Scott Thompson has this theory. Once we were being interviewed, and someone asked him, it was kind of a vague, dumb question. They got a good answer. They said, why is Saturday Night Live way more popular than you guys?
Oh, no.
Even though a lot of people think you're better.
Yeah.
And Scott said, in the world of lemonade, Saturday Night Live, it's the kind of lemonade you get at restaurants that's very sweet, and everybody likes it.
Yeah.
Even we like sweet lemonade. But for those small 20% people who love lemonade without sugar, that kind of sour taste, the people who love that kind of lemonade really love it. And that's what the Kids in the Hall are. We have the 20% audience of Saturday Night Live, but they really love our sour comedy, whereas everybody likes sweet comedy.
How long did it take you guys to, I mean, I've heard this before, you just kind of alluded to it, but I've heard this before, I think probably from all of you, that when you started out, you were just totally pretentious and more so than you had any right to be. But how long did it take for that to sort of fade away and just?
Lauren Michaels was still arguing about it, like brain candy. Thought we were pretentious, and we were pretentious about I'll get to that in a second. We were pretentious about an odd thing. We were pretentiously unpretentious.
Okay.
We were trying hard to be unpretentious, but it was pretentious in a way. And like Lauren Michaels, when he got our movie for us. We only got to do a movie with Paramount because Lauren Michaels had just done Wayne's World. And Paramount said, all right, we'll sign you for a 5-movie deal. We're really happy to work with you, movie. Lauren, what's your next movie? And Lauren said, well, it's my 5-man troupe, The Kids in the Hall. And I'm sure their mouths will drop. But he assumed that it was going to be a movie with our characters that were popular, like Chicken Lady and Head Crusher, and that was the furthest thing from. We would never do that.
Yeah.
And are we correct in never doing that? I mean, our first movie was a comedy about depression.
Yeah.
And I love Brain Candy, so the ending is a little. We could have worked on that, but I mostly love Brain Candy. But it should have been our third movie. But maybe we should have found done a movie about a town where a character like Chicken Lady and Head Crusher could live. Would that have killed us?
I don't know. It could have.
Maybe it would have. Maybe we had already thought of the best. Well, I think also we were thinking that we'd already thought of the best Chicken Lady, Head Crusher ideas.
Yeah.
I've already done 6 Simon Heckubuses. Are we going to write the best one for the movie? I don't know.
Exactly. When you get the opportunity to, throw a lot more money at it and to put it up on the big screen, I can see that you want. Let's do something different. Let's do something people haven't seen already.
So were we naturally cool or were we pretentiously cool? I at that point, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Real quickly, I think aside from Kids in the Hall and your stand-up, people probably know you most for your voice work.
Right.
So much of your comedy, though, is physical. Did you have a hard time translating that into animation?
I didn't, because also part of physicality is your voice. And I would say my voice is one of my comedy tools.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I consider that kind of physical. You can't see the funny face I'm making or anything like that, but it's also very tiring, because a lot of people who do cartoons, everyone who does cartoons are men and women of a million voices. They can do a million voices. I'm a man of one voice. It's a high-pitched scream.
But it's quite a voice.
It's quite a voice, but it's tiring. And also, since my voice sort of suggests this, my characters are usually dogs and cats who fall down a lot. So I'm spending hours in the studio going, oh, 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 oh. I just did a cartoon this morning where I did that. So I find it very physical. You can't see my those great faces I make, but it's very physical.
If Pleakley from Lilo and Stitch and the almighty Tallest Purple from Invader Zim starred in a buddy comedy together, what would it be about?
Let's see. Pleakley would be researching. I'm not sure. That's a good question. Let me call back to the next podcast show. I'll come up with it. That's right. They're both aliens, aren't they?
They're both aliens, and they both have to deal with...
Okay, well, they meet at a bar. Oh, yeah, and they're both investigators. Well, the one who runs the planet, he would be demoted. Purple would be demoted to, like, alien cop, and then he'd be forced to work with Pleakley, and it'd be a buddy cop alien spaceship movie.
I love it. I want to see it right now.
Only here's the hook.
Yeah.
They're both by the book.
Oh.
You usually have a by the book and a rebel.
Yeah. They have to both be by the book.
They're both by the book. And here's the other twist. I am coming up with the idea now. They like each other at the beginning, and then through the course of the movie, they grudgingly learn not to like each other.
I love it. You need to pitch that.
Yeah. I think we got it.
Where would you be right now if Kids in the Hall had never been a thing?
I would have been a movie theater manager. In 1984, the Kids in the Hall, there were like 13 of us at one point, and finally everybody, the 8 of us, we're doing the right math, quit because they got TV shows or Second City, and it became us 5 losers who couldn't get any work. And that was the beginning of our year, where we became the Kids in the Hall, and by the end of the year, we were so good we got discovered by Lorne Michaels. I didn't know that was going to happen. We were just playing a small club to like 60 people a night. But it felt something magical was happening, and I was a movie usher for a couple of years, and they asked me because I was kind of popular with the people that came in because I was a funny usher. Every theater has a funny usher. In those days, now ushers don't matter.
They don't matter at all.
I'm talking about the days of the flashlight.
Oh yeah, no, they don't even exist.
That's going to be the name of my biography. I just decided, the Days of the Flashlight.
Days of the Flashlight. I love it. You're coming up with all sort of brilliant gems here on the show.
I know. So you're helping me. Thanks. So they asked me to train to be a manager, and it would be full time. And that was my, big life moment decision, fork of the road thing. And I said, no, thank you. I'll just stay an usher for a little while longer until the Kids in the Hall get discovered. I actually said that to them.
Really?
They said, okay, buddy. All right. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
And so I think I would be a movie theater manager.
Oh, awesome. I know we've run out of time, but do you have time for one more question?
Yes.
Okay. You asked Wallace Shawn this on your podcast, so I'm going to throw it right back at you.
Yes.
What's the deal with Donald Trump?
Yeah, he gave such a good answer that that I can't think of anything else. What is the deal with it? Americans? The political system doesn't work. There are great politicians over the course of the past few hundred years. There have been great politicians, but the system doesn't work. So Americans do crave to hear something different. With Obama, it was the word hope. Luckily, the masses were right, and he was the right person to elect, in my humble opinion. Now, I think Americans crave for something different so much they're willing to be blind to obvious problems. And Trump brings obvious problems. They're ignoring that, and they're focusing on the fact that they think they have a champion that's speaking for them. Again, my humble opinion is that's absolutely not true. But I'm not hating Americans. I understand. I think it all stems from the political system. There's no political system in the world that works. But Americans are smarter, and as a result, they make bigger mistakes. Like when you see a great actor in a movie, when he's in the wrong script and he has a strong director. He's an amazing actor, but only an amazing actor can give a really horrible performance because he's giving 100% the wrong direction. And I think sometimes Americans can do that while voting.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so
There.
everybody listening, go vote.
You vote. But vote for Hillary.
You vote for the right person.
Yes.
Kevin, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. It's hilarious.
No, I had a lot of fun. I'm not even lying.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for this week on the Great Big Beautiful Podcast. Jamie, you did a good job. You did
Hey,
good.
thanks, buddy.
What a great interview. He's so fun.
It's so fun. And he's got one of those voices, like that's the Kevin McDonald voice, you know? Like, you listen to Lilo and Stitch and you hear, his character come out and you're like, that's Kevin McDonald! And it's like, it's just he's got just a voice that makes you want to laugh. He might not even be telling a joke, but it's like,
Right.
he's just so funny. It's so engaging. It was a great conversation.
So much fun. And if you guys liked it, why don't you send a tweet to Kevin? And I don't even know if he's on Twitter.
Yeah, he is on Twitter. His handle is Kevin the Kith, Kith for Kids in the Hall. Kevin the Kith.
Okay.
Go drop him a line and tell him you heard him on our show and that he is freaking hilarious.
And let him know that you just enjoyed him and thank him for coming on the show. And that would be great
And check
if you
out-
do that.
And check out his podcast.
Yes, for sure. Definitely go listen to his podcast. It's great. And I'll put a Great Big Beautiful Podcast guarantee on it that you'll like it. Ooh, that's the first ever guarantee.
I know. I don't even know what that is, but it sounds
It's a new
good.
thing. We're gonna do it.
I like it. All right, let's do it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming back week after week. If you don't come back week after week, hit that subscribe button. What are you waiting for?
Why don't you come back week after
You
week?
should come back because we have, let me tell you, some great guests coming up and some that we haven't even announced yet. And you're gonna be happy.
And if you're coming on new this month, September of 2006, is you're going to be assaulted because we're releasing 2 a week just to catch up on our backlog. So stay tuned for the tidal wave of awesomeness.
All of the episodes. All right, guys. You can find us on Twitter at the GBB Podcast, Facebook.com/the GBB Podcast. I am on Twitter as well at 140 Justin C.
And I am there as the Roarbots.
And we will see you next week right here on the Great Big Beautiful Podcast. Peace.
Take.
You like that? You like that?
I love it.
Peace.